Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to today's event. We are incredibly excited that you could join us today for a Sidak event. This is Guru in Sikhi, and today we're going to be delving into the role of Guru in a Sikh's life. Before we get started with all of our today's events, we just want to take the opportunity to welcome you and thank you for being a part of our event today. Sidak is something that is so near and dear to a lot of us. And it is, once we've attended Sidak, it becomes this very special part in our lives and a moment in our lives where we were able to delve into ourselves, into our Sikhi, and we made a lot of friends. And you will see throughout today that we have many alumni that are joining us and presenting with us. In fact, there are a number of alumni that have also joined us as participants as well today. So thank you for all of you for joining as well, to share this experience of what we get at Sidak. You will see that it's quite a inspiring place to be, and we're hoping that we can share that spark and that inspiration with all of you today. We have two sessions for you today, Guru in Sikhi and Connecting Through Sabad. And as I mentioned, our facilitators are facilitators at Sidak, so you'll get to meet some of them, as well as some of our alumni. A little bit about myself, just so you know who I am. I'll be guiding you and hosting this event today. My name is Pritpal Kaur. I am the lead for Sidak at Sikhi, and I am so incredibly excited to share a little piece of Sidak with you today. Today's event is a little glimpse into what we offer at Sikhi or at Sidak, and we're looking to show you a little bit of what Sidak has to offer. So my journey with Sidak started in 2014. I am from Surrey, British Columbia, and Sidak for the last a few years since 2014 has been in British Columbia in mission. I met some of my best friends at Sidak. I learned how to grow as a leader. Currently I'm a high school vice principal. When I started at Sidak, I was a high school math teacher. And one of the main things that I got out of Sidak for myself was definitely my personal growth, but also how it impacted my students, how being Sikh students and leaders, potential leaders into the future as well. And so they provided me with the tools in order to help guide other leaders as they're growing and learning in the world as well. Sidak had such an impact on me, and I truly found the leadership that I learned at Sidak not only to help me in my career, but also I went back to Sidak multiple times, as you'll see is quite a theme with many of our presenters here today. We tend to find our way back to Sidak. I found my way back as in coordinating roles, in facilitation roles, and now I find myself in the lead role here. We are, as I mentioned, we're very excited to have you all here. But just to get things kicked off and started, I would like to invite Diveesh Singh, and to be honest, not totally sure what he's going to talk about, but it's going to be more of an opening, and a couple of things about Diveesh. Diveesh Singh is our executive director at the Sikh Research Institute. He is also one of our facilitators. Diveesh Singh and I have presented together with our SALT sessions, which are our leadership sessions. He's also helped out in the other tracks in different ways. And so we are excited to have him here today with us. So take it away, Diveesh Singh.
Wonderful. Can you hear me, Anu?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Well, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh to everybody. Anu Kaur is usually not the only one that doesn't know what I'm about to say before I speak, but usually I'm largely on point. So first of all, on behalf of the Sikh Research Institute, our staff, our board, our advisors, our funders, I want to welcome you to this Sidak program. Sikhi's mission is to help everyone help find a connection and inspiration in their Sikhi. And we do this through a whole set of tools and programs and offerings that take people on the journey of awareness to transformation through their connection with the Guru. We are not the ones that inspire. We are not the ones that make the change happen. We are merely a platform, a space, a community, a movement that allows that magic to happen when a Sikh develops their own relationship with the Guru in all its different forms. And nothing better illustrates that mission than our Sidak flagship program. Sidak is not just a camp. We say it's not a camp. It's not just, it has many of the elements that those of us that grew up in Sikh camps have, the fun, the camaraderie, in pre-COVID world when we would get together and have a lot of late night conversations and a lot of outdoor activities and things like that. But with COVID, we've really taken the concept of Sidak and expanded it to be much bigger than a 2-week program. It takes the heart of that and actually tries to recreate that in different spaces. And I can personally speak as someone who actually never, I can confess, I never actually went through the Sidak program, but Sidak has become an absolutely major part of my life, having only missed it a couple of times in the last, I'll say 10 plus years. I brought my family to it. My children have come to it. Sidak is a leadership program, but not in a conventional sense. And in the Sikh world, the way our gurus have defined things, nothing is conventional. We may use the same words, but they mean a totally different thing. So the word leadership has connotations in a Western model, in Eastern models, in a Punjabi or Indian political model. But for us, when we look at this leadership program of Sidak, we unpack it through a totally different paradigm, and that's the Gurmat paradigm that I'm sure we'll get covered many times today, of through a connection with Gurbani, history, lifestyle, Rat, all those different things come together. And Sidak at its best engages our heart, our mind, and our hands. So it helps us fall in love with Sikhi, with the Guru, with Gurbani, with other Sikhs, with our Sangat. It engages the mind and helps us see the world through that lens of how do I look at contemporary issues? How do I look at our own history? How do I look at my career? What I do with my life, my vocation, with a Sikh lens. And then hopefully, most importantly, it allows us to put that into action so that we can bring that Sikh mindset to our family, to our personal relationships, to how we engage with the rest of the world. So Sidak is this opportunity to really give you space to think about how Sikhi can be this foundation to help you transform your inner and outer realities. And it's been like that for me. Like they say, there's no better way to learn than teach. And I'm sure Anus knows that from her career in teaching as well. And having been a part of Sidak as an instructor, leading different programs, sessions, being part of it, it has been one of the largest educational and kind of patriotic experiences in my life, where I've been able to immerse inside the world of Sikhi. And for many of us for whom Sikhi has played a instrumental part of our lives, I can say my Sikhi and Sikhi and Sidak are actually very intertwined. And so those of you who have been to Sidak in person know what I mean about the magic of that place, especially at Khalsa Center in British Columbia. The time I spend there is just surreal. It's otherworldly, and I know that one day soon we'll have a chance to go back there and be in each other's presence. As much as we hate Zoom, I am very thankful for the Zoom online world, because in a virtual Sangat, a virtual community is certainly better than this physical isolation that we would just have if there wasn't this. But boy, I am I'm looking forward to a packed Devon Hall with lots of people all scrunched around me, and being there and being able to be a part of a Ranswai, an Asakivad, a Kirtan, a wonderful Raras, a Vichar. I miss the words of the day on the wall that we do in Devons. I miss the Langar Hall. I miss being late for programs because we're having really amazing conversations after a session. All those things will return in due course. But until then, the team today has put together a magical program that I think is going to really give you an essence of what that is. And it's led by Anukor, who just want to thank for her leadership. Talk about her. Everyone has gone through a journey. And in the time I've known Anu, she's gone from a participant to a teacher and very much a leader of this program for us. And so thank her and the entire team for putting this together. I'm really looking forward to learning. I think the last thing I'll say is the beauty of today is that it's kind of by Sidakers for Sidakers. So we talk often about, who is going to take over succession planning? Where is the next generation coming from? Who is going to take the baton? And today you're going to see we are the ones we've been waiting for. The Sidakers are now actually the ones that are now leading sessions and doing that for some time, and that is intentional. And it gives us great sense of satisfaction and gratitude that we have put something in place that hopefully is now becoming self-perpetuating. So with that, enjoy the day. Hope you take some learnings and reflection from there, and I'll turn it back to Anukor for the rest of the program.
All right, thank you so much for that, Diveesh Singh. As we talk about all of our experiences today, you'll start to see some themes in this about this idea, this inspiration. This is what we got from it, the leadership, and you'll see that on display today as well. So before we get started, I'm just going to go through a couple of housekeeping things and a few reminders for everyone before we get right into our session. And let me just pop my screen up here. There we go. So today, the shape of today. So we started off with our opening. We will move into our session 1 on Guru and Sikhi, where we'll have Kiran Kaur, Jujhaar Singh, and Pritpal Singh presenting, followed by a video from that's been prepared for you on Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib. We did have a conference recently, and so we have put this video together for you. And then we'll roll into our second session, which is connecting through Sabad with Satprit Kaur, Jasleen Kaur. Kiran Kaur will be joining us again, and Diveesh Singh as well, and followed up by closing remarks towards the end. So you can see we do have a packed schedule for today, but a very inspirationally packed schedule. Technical reminders, just in case you lose connection, not to worry, just rejoin. If you need to rejoin through phone line, that confirmation email you were sent last night has all that information in there. You may have noticed that the sessions are being recorded, and we will be sharing these after the event. If you have any questions during the presentations, put them into the chat along with your name. They'll be addressed during our Q&A. During the Q&A sessions, we will be making use of the raise hand feature, so you will be able to ask questions if you'd like during that, or just pop them in the chat and we will address them during then. Breakout rooms. So both of our sessions do have some breakout rooms, and during those breakout rooms, we do encourage you to turn on your videos if possible, because that's what's going to create our conversation, and you get a chance to meet everyone as well during those breakout rooms. Anytime during these presentations, if you need any assistance, please just pop it into the chat. We have Jasleen Kaur in the background. She's Jasleen Kaur admin. If you have any questions, just send them her direction, and she will address those as we go. All right, so just a couple of notes on the culture at Sidak. This is extending to this event as well. As we've said, this is a glimpse into Sidak, and so it's also a glimpse into the sort of environment that we create. And so the biggest thing to remember here is that this is a safe space. It does take a lot of courage to come and be vulnerable and kind of reconstruct some of your learnings and your understandings. And so we'd ask you to be mindful and respectful of the viewpoints of others that may be a little different than yours. When we get into these discussion groups, you will hear from many participants. And so just just be mindful of their viewpoints as well. But the biggest thing here is about asking questions, and Sidak is all about asking questions that you've wanted to ask, but you were afraid to ask. So this is a no judgment place. If you've got a question, it may seem to you that, oh, I don't know if I'm okay saying this. Is this an appropriate question? Please ask the question, because you will never know until you ask the question. And Sidak, this is Sidak. This is what we do. And also enjoy. You are going to see a lot of information. You're going to have a lot of moments of reflection. But at the end of the day, this is really a time for you to enjoy your learning here today. All right. And with that, that brings us to the opening of our very first session, Guru in Sikhi. So this session will be focusing in on the Guru's role in a Sikh's personal and panthak lives. We'll go through a bit of history and descriptions of the role. Today we have with us presenting Jujhaar Singh, Pritpal Singh, and Kiran Kaur. Just a little background on our three presenters. Jujhaar Singh is an alumni of 2010 and 2013. He's a facilitator with Sidak, and he is also on our board of directors. Jujhaar Singh, I met Jujhaar Singh at Sidak in 2014, and he was actually my TA for Sikhi 201. And then following that, he's now become our facilitator with the program during Sidak. Kiran Kaur is I also met for the first time in 2014, and she came back again as a participant in 2017 and again in 2018 and 2019. She was a TA for Sikhi 20 or Sikhi 101. And also helped with our facilitation team last year during Sidak 2020, which was online. And she's back again today presenting throughout the day. And so we're very excited to have her here. Kiran is an amazing artist, and a lot of her pieces really are inspired by what she's learned at Sidak. And also we have Pritpal Singh. Pritpal Singh is a facilitator for Sikhi 101. And again, and you'll notice this, a lot of our facilitators, although they're in main tracks, we do kind of jump in and out of other tracks as well. Pritpal Singh is known to be the funny person at Sidak. He definitely brings the humor and the fun at Sidak. And we're very excited to have all three of them here today. So I will turn this over to the team to present. And first up, we have Jujhaar Singh.
Waheguru Khalsa, Waheguru Ki Fateh. It's nice to see at least that there's a lot of people here. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Anukor. And just a couple things that we want to keep in mind. The first is that, as you can see, most of us have our videos off and our cameras off. Feel free to use the reactions button if you'd like to, if something was confusing or you liked something that we said. You can find it at the bottom right corner. In fact, if you want to just go ahead and give a fake reaction or a just a test reaction, go for it now. There we go. And then the other thing is that if you have any questions or reflections, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring it. We all will be. We'll save the Q&A for the end. And then lastly, just a couple things for you personally. This presentation only takes shape if you engage with it. So what I would love to have people do is really think about what this means for you. Sikhi and Guru, the concept of Guru is a very personal thing for everyone. So take this time to be open, be gentle with yourself and others as you learn and kind of explore, and just keep an open mind. So that's the only intro I will give. The first thing we're going to talk about is actually your current thoughts towards Guru and Sikhi. So we have these two questions open. And before we get into sharing, what I'd like you to do is just close your eyes and think about what is Guru to you and why is Guru important to you. So all of us as Sikhs have a connection with Guru. So I'm just going to take 30 seconds, close your eyes and think about that. Thanks for doing that. What we're going to do now is actually share a little bit, but in this Jamboard. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to share that Jamboard. It's been shared in the chat, so you can go ahead and click on it. And essentially what you can do here is if you come here to the sticky note section, you can click it and you can put what Guru means to you. So Guru is grace, you might say. And then you can save it. There's also other things you can do here like draw, but probably the easiest is just clicking the sticky note button. So we're going to give you a few minutes to just, we're going to give about 4 minutes to just type, whatever Guru means to you, whatever reflections you had in this. Nice. And I'm going to go ahead and move some of them because they're piling up a little bit. Guide. We have a lot of guiding values, path, role model, inspiration, support. Yeah, feel free to move these around. The ship. Interesting. It's good. Reality check. Yeah, there's a lot of perfect wisdom, a guiding light, mentor. Confidant. Yeah. Role model. Yeah, this is wonderful. A lot of similar themes here, but all in unique ways. Unconditional light. Feeling. Interesting. Inspiration. Love, friend. Yeah, and if you want, feel free to put, if there's a shabad or a tuk that sticks in your mind when you think of Guru, feel free to share that as well. You can share multiple: intuition, eternal. Yeah, this is beautiful. I really enjoy the ones about love, light, reality. Tu mera rakha, sabni time. Yeah. So as we can see, in a Sikh's life, the Guru is such a powerful force and means so many things to so many different people. End in the beginning. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's really beautiful. I think we'll put any last ones you have, maybe 30 more seconds. Guru jaisa nahi ko dev, jis mastak paag laga sev. Sunshine. Thank you for sharing that. And hopefully, it was interesting to see others as well. And in some ways, there's such a personal relationship, but you can tell that for us as Sikhs, the Guru is such a pivotal concept. So I'll go ahead and start sharing again. You can keep putting stuff in the Jamboard if you'd like. It's a good way to, kind of see what everyone thinks. So in this slide, these are some of the concepts that actually you all shared, and I just wanted to go through briefly. So this is by no means an exhaustive list, but some ways that we can think about Guru are as a revelatory messenger. You can think of Guru Nanak saying, Mardana Rabab Cher Turki Bani Ai, that, you know, the origin, the Tur, the source, the Bani from the source is coming through me. So we think about Guru as someone who is able to connect us to Vaheguru as a messenger of that revelation. The second is as the essence of the Guru, as the message itself. So Shabad Guru, you know, the Guru Granth Sahib. Oh, pardon me, I have the timers going off that I had. So we think about Guru Granth Sahib as the essence of Guru, Shabad Guru. The third we might think about Guru is as a revolutionary. So when you think about how the Gurus brought revolution to individuals and revolutionized individuals, and then to societies, you know, we're talking about nation building, we're talking about freedom from oppression. And that the Gurus not only had the PD side, but the media as well. They were very much in the world and trying to make it a better place. A lot of people talked about a common way to interpret Guru is as teacher. So illuminating or visionary guide. This is someone who brings you along the path. And you can think of Sakhis like Sajjan Khag, where someone who is completely focused on their own gain, on even hurting other people, is changed by Guru Nanak into someone who then does net positive good for the world and starts to take care of people. Guru as perfection. I think in Sikh parlance, you know, all of us are in some ways trying to strive to be as great as possible, but the Guru is the embodiment of that perfection. And you'll hear this in stuff like Mera Pura Satguru. Pura means full or complete. And that's kind of a way of saying the complete or perfect Guru. And then lastly is institution. And this is one that we'll definitely be covering in the rest of the session. But Guru Granth and Guru Panth, how is Guru embodied in Sikhs today, in the Panth today? And then lastly, we kind of have the etymological meaning. So Gu means darkness and Ru means light. So if you think about someone who takes you from darkness to light, the illuminator. And so as you can see, the concept is actually quite broad. And even in the Jamboard that we just put up, the sheet where everyone's shared, you could see that all these elements kind of start to come out. So maybe we can start with kind of a basic question, which is, what is the role of Guru? And there's a lot of great answers to these questions. Feel free to put yours in the chat. But one way to think about it is in the Sikh paradigm, if we look at Mool Mantar, Ik Onkar or One Force, and this translation, this transcreation might be something that's a little bit newer for you. But if we look at Mool Mantar, the last line of Gur Prasad, so realized through the perfect Guru, the Guru is the way to understand Vaheguru. That's how important Guru is in our lives. The Guru is the one who helps us connect with Ik Onkar. And this is different from some other traditions where, you know, there has to be an intermediary. You know, we all believe that each of us have a personal connection with Ik Onkar, but the way to realize that and strengthen it is through Guru. And you hear this in Bani, Bin Satgur Kinana Payo, Bin Satgur Kinana Paya. So Satguru is really the way to embody the divine traits, which are listed here. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pritpal Singh, who is going to be taking us through the Guru in history. Thank you for your participation, and I hope that we started thinking about the role of Guru. Pritpal Singh?
Anji, thank you, Jujhaar Singh. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I'm Pritpal Singh, and I'll be sharing with you about the role of Guru in history. Next slide, please. So we all know there were 10 Gurus. They took on 10 physical forms. But according to Gurbani, their spirit was essentially the same. There's a Var by Satta and Balwant, which talk about even though the bodies change, but the spirit was essentially the same. and they had direct connection with the divine, with one universal message. And this is quite profound, because what makes it unique is it appealed to everybody. There was no exclusion criteria. It didn't matter where you were born, what language you spoke, what your family status was, what your education background was, what your gender was. But what mattered was you're willing to be inspired, your willingness to listen, give yourself an opportunity. And that was the genius of the Guru, that they transformed and average individuals in every spectrum of their life, and the way they operated. It was beautiful. Next slide, please. So back in 15th century, when Guru Nanak came, and this is still true to some extent, that there were intermediaries who actually told you, who dictated what your relationship could be, if at all, with the divine. But gurus disrupted that. It's that only you will define what your relationship with the divine will be. It will based on your passion, your desires, your efforts, not somebody else telling you what it could be or could not be. And the way they did that was, again, the universal message of employment of common language. So yes, gurus connected with average folks because they spoke the language that the average person spoke. And so it's not just Persian, language of the elite, or Sanskrit. Gurus spoke and wrote and had conversations with common folks in vernacular languages. And it's not by coincidence Guru Granth Sahib Ji has all these languages within it. That was the beauty of, that was their communication genius, that they connected with individuals. Yes, there was a development of a script called Gurmukhi, which provided consistency. Next, please. Next slide, please. So some of the examples let's sort of dwell on is Guru Nanak's reduction of the Janau. So you've all sort of, I'm sure, have heard this Sakhi. Guru Nanak was a child. Imagine his father was the second most important person in the town. So imagine your father has invited who's who in the town. The mayor is there, all the business leadership is there, the political leadership is there, the religious leadership is there, to witness this event where you step into adulthood, where you go through a ceremony which makes a statement that you're entering adulthood. Everybody's eyes are on you. And Guru Nanak questions it. And he questions it in a way saying that, tell me how this cotton thread is supposed to make me a better person. How will it improve my connection with the divine? And he's told, well, it's just the way it is. And he brings in the gender issues as well. He says, well, if it's because of my age, then how come my sister, who's 5 years elder than me, Bebe Nanki, was not given that same opportunity? It takes courage to do that. Guru Nanak set the standard early on in his life that he's not going to embrace meaningless rituals. Rituals by themselves, without actual change in attitude, in behavior, in decision-making process, actually serve no purpose. So when we look at that, as we aspire towards looking at Guru Nanak, not just through historical lens, but applying it to our lives, it should provide us with insight. What drives us? Are we doing things in our life which are strictly ritualistic, or do they actually have meanings? Let's look at the next example, selection by Mardana as a travel partner. Imagine you're going on a journey, a 20-year journey. That might be a little difficult to imagine. Let's make it real. Let's say you're going backpacking for a couple of weeks. Who will you choose as your partner? And what would your selection criteria be based on? Guru Nanak chose Bhai Mardana based on this gift he had of music. He played rabab, which captures the spirit of humanity. And he didn't see that Bhai Mardana came from a different background, family background, that his family had different faith. He didn't see the differences that were any labels with Bhai Mardana. He saw the goodness, how Bhai Mardana can actually create oneness and bring people together. And if that is something that we look at and try to, learn from that example, is how does it apply to our lives? How much do we, when we have to create relationships, what drives us to create that relationship? Is it the labels? Is it sort of doing risk benefit analysis, or it's something that's greater than all of that? And music, music is so beautiful because it goes beyond cultures, beyond languages. And Bhai Mardana had that gift. And right now, if you want to learn music, all you have to do is Google it. Perhaps you'll find teaching lessons. You can hire a coach to do that. The access is quite easy. But back in the day during Guru period, music was only for the elite. In the hierarchy of pyramid system, caste system, the lower classes had no access to it. And by doing it, the gurus opened access to all, to common folks. The only requirement actually was your desire. So the question again comes to us: what is our desire? What do we want to do? Next slide, please. There are multiple examples on here. In interest of time, I'll just talk about one. Look at compilation of Ad Granth. So Guru Arjan Patshaw, he compiled the Bani of 4 earlier gurus than him. And not just that, he actually took writings of non-Sikhs and included in Ad Granth. This is monumental. He didn't look at the labels or their backgrounds. He looked at, is the message of their writings same as what it is of Guru Nanak, of connecting, of oneness, of creating a relationship with Creator and the creation. And history had never witnessed that before. And till this day, it's an amazing example for us and for the world. The idea again is, when we have to make a decision, when we look at our behavior, we have to have connection with what is driving it. Is it creating oneness? Does it have a universal appeal? Or is it something else that's driving it? So gurus, as you can look at these examples, what we just discussed, they didn't quite sit on the sidelines. They were very active. They embraced controversial stuff because to them, the controversies were not controversial at all. The methodology they utilized was very creative and one that connected people. So if we want to invite Guru into our life, what we should be thinking about is not just learning some things for test or for this, learning it for just for academic purposes, but the idea is, if we are trying to emulate the example set by the gurus, reflecting on our own actions, and how do I create that oneness with the divinity? How do I create that relationship with my surroundings? What's happening in my surroundings? Does it impact me? Why or why not? Next slide, please. So I think, next slide, please. What we'll look at like all of you to take 4 minutes, and we'll repeat the same thing what we did earlier with the Jamboard. The link is on there. If you can click on it, please think about this question and start writing that. How can your relationship with the Guru be reflected in your actions? So how can you have a relationship? How could you improve your relationship with the Guru? Remember, there are no right or wrong answers. Take a minute, think about it, use the sticky notes, like the example we did, and share. So it's a little bit tougher question. It's asking you to think, but that's the whole idea. Very good. Recognition of others' humanity. Compassion towards others. It does start with that. Respect. Being non-judgmental. Very good. Standing up for what's right. Application of Guruji's lesson. Very good. Yeah. Without the application, it's purely an academic exercise. Showing love. Yeah. Having trust in divine will. Listening. Yeah. That's often a skill that has to be learned. Life of service. How to relate and have compassion for people who might not come from the same background. Absolutely. Look at the example of Bhai Mardana. Thinking beyond self. Living mindfully. Perhaps living in awareness. Doing Paat, Kirtan, applying what Bani says. Simple thing, but very profound. Fighting against injustice. Connecting to Guru. Yeah, that is the key. Asking questions and then actually listening to the response. To be non-judgmental towards peers. To experience oneness. So these are excellent ideas. The key lies in applications. Creating Wahguru moments in everyday life. That would require being in awareness. Very good. To communicate with wisdom. Creating things that are accessible in life and work. Yeah. Feeling the grace. Yeah. It has to start with the feeling. If feeling is not there, then there will be obstacles. Yes. This is excellent. Let's take about 30 more seconds and we'll move on to our next. Apply Sikhi lens on happenings around the world. Yeah. You have to. Self-love and self-compassion. Counseling. Wow. Yeah. Perhaps proactive counseling. Usually we look at counseling in a negative way. What happened wrong? Understanding Hukum. Yeah. This is
I think Pritpal Singh may have frozen on my end. Helping the needy, being open towards happenings and not giving labels. Yeah, I'm sharing. Yeah, I think while he's coming back, these are all excellent answers, and I especially love the ones that are talking about, living the revolution that the Guru started. I think he will rejoin in a second, but until then, what I'll do is go back to the presentation, and I think actually the next portion is going to be run by Kiran Kaur.
Yeah, thanks, Jujhaar. Vaiguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaiguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Kiran Kaur, and I'm going to talk about this next segment of the presentation, which is in a post-Guru period or in a post-embodied Guru as leadership, what does Guru look like? Because it's clear in the examples that Pritpal Virji gave about what Guru Nanak Sahib did while he was walking the earth, but in a time after that, how do we recognize and see Guru in the world? And so next slide, please. We're going to start with sort of the tail end of that historical chronology. So beginning with the establishment, so to speak, of the Guru Khalsa Panth in 1699. And so when we say Guru Granth and Guru Panth, there's the concept of Guru Granth as the Guru Granth Sahib as the selected works of Gurbani that became an authority. And I'll touch on that again later. The second half is the Guru Khalsa Panth as established by Guru Gobind Singh Sahib. And so he established what the authority would be going forward following himself as the 10th embodied Guru, and bestowed Guruship and Guru Gaddi to the Khalsa Panth on that day of Vaisakhi in 1699, not just by saying it, but by giving and then receiving Amrit from the Panch Pyare. And so it was that action of receiving Khanda Kipol from 5 Sikhs, who he had given that authority to, that conveyed that message, so that without doubt or without hesitation, Guru Gobind Singh Sahib kneeled in front of 5 members of the Guru Khalsa Panth and created that authority, which is incredibly powerful. So the underlying message being that the Guru in all of this, in this all-embracing approach, was asking us to give up things like caste and creed and these other divisions and try to replace them with these tenets that were given as names to the 5 Singhs. So next slide, please. As I had mentioned, the first half being Guru Granth, and just as Khanda Kipol was the indication of authority for the Guru Khalsa Panth, the authority from the Guru Granth Sahib is given within. And so this line, Poti Parmeshwar Ka Than, is the idea that the Guru Granth is the dwelling place of the divine, of Ik Onkar. And so all the immortal things, all those immortal truths with like a capital T are found in the Guru Granth Sahib, which is from where it gets its authority. Next slide, please. And so this is a quote by Professor Pritpal Singh. And he says, in the constitution of the Khalsa Commonwealth, the greatest act of genius of Guru Gobind Singh was when he transferred the divine sovereignty vested in him to the God-inspired people, the Khalsa. So as Jujhaar Singh was discussing before, that Guru is the messenger and the message and the embodiment and the manifestation of this jyot, or this divine light. That's what makes that transfer of power to the Panth much more notable, because it's saying that that same light and spirit, that same thread that carried the message through the 10 embodied Gurus, can also be found in the Guru Granth as well as the people who follow it in that Sangat. And so that was the stroke of genius that Professor Pritpal Singh talks about. So next slide, please. Pritpal Singh was talking about the revolution as it began. So there's examples about Guru Nanak Sahib and what he was trying to convey. And so there were goals to that revolution. There was this very intentional assertion of an egalitarian society, politically, economically, in terms of civil aspects, to fight religious oppression and political oppression, to give power back to the people. And so those goals were linked and interdependent and carried through from the time that the Gurus were around straight afterwards. And so the scope of the presentation doesn't extend to all of these examples, but this is something that is definitely part of discussion at Sidak. But for this purpose, I will go to the first one, which is the Khalsa Raj. So in terms of that establishment of an egalitarian society, this was a very poignant example. So in 1710, the Sikhs set up this republic underneath Banda Singh Bahadur, where land was given to the people, equality of citizenship was given, the idea that power came from the people and not from a privileged class was unique and was revolutionary at the time. And so there's a few extra things that are mentioned there: the coin, the seal, capital, the land. The coin, from within a history or sociological framework, currency gives sovereignty to a people in many ways, and having capital in that way. And so the names of Guru Nanak and Guru Gobind were on this coin. And so insofar as revolutionary goals go, this is a time where one could argue in a post-Guru period, the Panth was able to live out some of those goals. And this, of course, led to the missile system later down the line with its own strengths and challenges. But the idea is that the authority given to the Guru Khalsa Panth was also sovereignty. Next slide, please. Then, so as sort of like a culminating concept that ties our three components of this presentation together, Guru is more than just the 10 embodied Gurus or just the Shabad Guru on its own. It's a combination of all these things. So there's a tuk, Sabad Guru Surat Tun Chela. Wisdom is the Guru, and the consciousness or those consciousnesses that are attuned to it are the disciples. And so the wisdom has multiple forms, but regardless, that consciousness that taps into any of these sources, that's what a Sikh is, that's what a disciple is. And so wisdom is what can put us on this path of understanding, identifying with, remembering, praising a Kankar, living out those ideals. And we can find that wisdom accessibly in the Guru Granth Sahib, as the other presenters talked about how accessible it's meant to be. And then as a collective, the Khalsa Panth is responsible for upholding those values of justice, of human rights, of religious freedom that draw from that basis. So as much as wisdom as can be found accessibly within the Guru Granth Sahib, in terms of direction or directives, that also comes from my Sangat and also comes from my Guru. And so the idea of those being tied together. So the last section of this presentation is going to be one last question. And in the context of sovereignty, community, allegiance, principle, all the abstract and the concrete that we've discussed, we're going to do a final question. So next slide, please. So for the next 10 minutes, we're going to hop into some breakout rooms. Please turn your videos on and discuss with each other this question in the context of everything that we just talked about. Someone should be ready to share from your group what your collective discussion was, and feel free to take your time in figuring out what it is that you would like to share when we come back to the main group. There's, of course, no one right answer, as it's a personal reflection, but there's a wider range of possibilities. So I believe we're going to send out the breakout rooms.
We all went into breakout rooms, and now we're all back. So the next section is we'd actually like you all to share, if you feel comfortable, what you talked about in the breakout rooms. So what that means is that hopefully each breakout room designated one person to share some of the thoughts. If that was you, please just turn on your video, but keep your audio off, and we'll add you to the group and you can talk about it. And if you had thoughts to share and you weren't necessarily, anyone can share any thoughts in the chat about what you talked about, things that were surprising or interesting, or etc. And I'm going to actually go ahead and stop screen sharing so we can just have this conversation. But take one last look at the question, which is, how do you foster your relationship with Guru Granth and Guru Panth? Cool. So looks like Sangeet Anand is one of the group volunteers. Sangeet, please give us a minute. We want to keep it short because we don't have a ton of time, but give us a minute about what you all talked about. Oh, and you're still muted.
Oh, hello, everyone. I don't know if I have a minute, but I'll share what we thought. So I think the key things were getting the knowledge from the history, looking back and taking notes from there, and seeing how the gurus, what their actions were, what their their thought process was, reading books. And then so that's the knowledge and history portion. And then the other portion is having sangat and support. So having a community where you can, whether that's from the Gurdwara or an online community, or even people who are not Sikhs who have similar values and want to talk about, similar things similar concepts that come out of the Guru Granth and Guru Panth. And then the third kind of thing was getting that knowledge and then having that support in community and applying it. So whether that's through seva or through, your daily life, your actions. So applying that knowledge and having that community to support you while you do that. So that's kind of that was our combined answer.
That was a perfectly, well timed, and it seems like there are a lot of great concepts in there. Sangat, seva, learning. So thank you for sharing that. Other group members from Sangeet, feel free to add a reaction, just so we know who you were. And for the next part, let's have Manat Kaur.
Sure. My video is disabled, so I can't turn on my camera, but we talked a lot about how it was oftentimes felt easier to follow the Guru Granth than it was to follow the Guru Panth. It just felt more personal versus I think sometimes in like following the Panth, it's subject to a lot of judgment from other people about like, are you following Rehat? Are you following Guru's Hukam the right way? And so we talked about how we wanted to actually start following Guru Panth more openly and just create a safer space, a safer Sangat, like Sangeet was talking about, where we could do both.
That's really cool. I love that answer, and thank you for sharing that. And group members for Manat Kaur, if you want to, give a reaction, feel free. Next, let's go to Komarveer.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So my partner was Imrit in the breakout room. And the way that I talked about the personal relationship with the Guru. And I thought that before I start to think about what the Panth needs, I need to kind of have that relationship with the Guru myself. And so once I can foster that relationship, and that just involves in like putting in that work. Like everyone tells you that your Guru is your rock and your Guru is you have to have faith in your Guru, you have to trust your Guru. But I think that saying these things is, a lot easier than actually believing them and actually cultivating that trust and faith that you have in your Guru. So putting in that work was the first step. And then Imrit spoke about how once you can do that, the best way to actually approach Guru Panth is through Sangat, like the other Sidakers have mentioned before. And so, for example, what we're doing here is like creating a little community and becoming each other's Sangat is a seva in sort of a way. And when we talk about concepts like Gurbani and we talk about all these things that happen in history, they only strengthen the relationship that we have with their Guru, which in turn then strengthen the relationship we have within each other, and kind of reminds me of Miri and Piri, how you need to have the one before you have the other, and then it's like a perpetuating cycle, just doesn't stop.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. A lot
Thank
of
you.
great concepts there. Jigaraj, sir?
Hey guys, I think just a quick summary with just what our group was going through was one thing we've noticed was like, trying to balance life, and with Guruji's message of finding that balance, too much of anything is bad. So, like ras mita ras mas, like too much of sugar is bad, right? So finding that balance, I feel like you learn more about yourself. And when you learn more about yourself, you're more in tune with him. So for example, one of the Bajis was saying, there's so many distractions in the world we live in, right? But that's Guruji's message of, living in these distractions and still being in touch with him. So personally for me, finding that balance, I feel like, when to be humble, when to talk up, like stuff like that. You find like, okay, I see what's going on here. And you learn more about when to draw those lines for yourself. And, goes back to too much discipline to spontaneity, right? Doing Path and Rat Mirada, like I'm not going to sit here and tell you I do Panch Baniya, but I try to do the little bit, like I'll do, Kirtan Sala every night, something simple. So I think was the main message that we were trying to get to. So just finding that own balance for yourself, and slowly that's how you can start fostering a relationship with yourself and God.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be in every single one of these breakout groups. They're such awesome topics to cover. Angad Singh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So we had Guntas and Gurpreet Kaur and myself. So we were three people. We were just like what to talk about because it's such a wide range of topic to be discussed. But the summary is that as Kunwar Veer said that the first connection should be built with the Guru, and the Guru and the Panth are no two different entities. It's one. And if we are connected to Guru, we are somewhere down the line always connected to the Panth. So then we brought the discussion that, at a personal level, we read Gurbani for self. We read Gurbani for our, I mean, like all the motivation, the courses, whatever we do is something we feel that we are doing for ourselves because, and to deal with our vikars. But somewhere down the line, we do not realize that the more we get connected to the Guru, the more the society that we surround ourselves, or the energy that we surround ourselves, is of a similar part. So the Panth is something that we are building. The content that we are reading, we are promoting that content. So that is aligned to the Guru. The people we are meeting, we are encouraging them, we are supporting them. So we are somewhere encouraging the Panth as well. So that was one part. But also bringing to the discussion was that Panth is not just people who are wearing turbans or who know Punjabi. Panth is something, what we are, 10% or 5% of the whole population, but the Jyot exists in the 97% of the world as well. So the last point was that remembering the lessons of Guru from the historic, as Kiran Kaur had shared, and Pritpal Viji shared about the historical revolutions, is a remembrance that even we as an individual can bring the same revolution today as well. And there were no people like Sikhs there at that time, and even then the Guru was able to do it. And now we have Guru Granth Sahib Ji with all the message, and we are still not able to match up to the expectation level of the Guru. Sorry for taking a lot of time, but we had so much going around with this topic. Thank you for bringing this topic. That's it. Thank you. Waheguru.
Thank you for sharing that. Is there anyone else who'd like to share? You didn't have to be a lead in your group. Any other? Good. Anika Singh, although you're still on mute.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So I was with Robbie Gill. It was just the two of us. So we got more time to talk, which was great. Thanks, Robbie. Maybe you could come online as well and support me in what we share. So what we discussed about was, and like you said, there's no right and wrong. So I hope, we discussed it from a different perspectives, where we said that Guru Granth is the Shabad wisdom, the wisdom is there, and Panth is when we are institutionalizing some of the things that we've got from the wisdom and taking it forward, like we talked about the Langar Seva. We had a very interesting conversation about how do we use all these things in our personal lives. He shared some example from his life, how Japji Sahib has been something that has been very powerful for him, and how he starts his day with that. And we discussed some of those things. With our work backgrounds as well, how that wisdom helps us. How do we translate that wisdom into day-to-day life and situations? So yeah, it was a great opportunity to have that kind of a dialogue. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Shabad wisdom and seva through Panth. It's awesome. I think Tarsam.
Tarsim Singh.
Tarsim Singh, yeah, and this will be the last one. So go for it.
Okay, just a short one. Members in my group, we were relating how the different words, different labels, different characteristics of gurus that were shared appeal to us, related to us at different phases of our lives. And we were quite intrigued to explore that further. Why is that so? Is there something to it? What does this mean? How do we get the complete picture? So that was something that we wanted to explore further. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you everyone for sharing. I wrote down some of the words and phrases that were used. Those stuff like revolution, you know, individual relationship with Guru Granth and Guru Panth. Pritpal Singh and Kiran Kaur, anything you any comments or thoughts on the sharing?
It was very actually good to hear from everybody that not only you actually discussed the concepts that were covered in these brief 3 sections, but you actually applied it. And that's the whole idea, because if the application is not there, then really there is no growth. So thank you for doing that for the benefit for not just yourself, but for everybody.
Yeah. Kiran Kaur, anything to add?
Yeah, I think I very much appreciate, again, everybody sharing and being so open, even though we met each other half an hour ago. I think it's a deeply personal thing to reflect on, like right out the gates. And so I appreciate that. And I think a lot of the things that each of you shared will resonate with different people within this group differently, because some of us are on similar journeys, some of us are on different journeys, depending on where we grew up and what our relationship currently is or has been. And so I appreciate everybody sharing and being so open.
That was awesome. I mean, honestly, you should be teaching us, and we're all learning as we facilitate and talk from each other, like Kiran Kaur said. I think the rest of the time that we have is for Q&A. So we wanted to leave some time in case there were topics people wanted to discuss or questions that you had based on the presentation. Feel free to. The best way probably is to put it in the chat. If that's difficult for you, raise your hand or go ahead and give us a signal, and we'll call on you. And if no one asks questions, then I'll just have to ask the other 2 questions that come to mind for me.
Please do me a favor, guys, and ask some questions. I don't want Jujhaar Singh to ask me questions.
I have a question for, I would say, like all of you guys, and it's a really generic question, but I think it's become more and more important for me throughout this pandemic, which was not just the pandemic, but also, like, you know, we've seen a lot of social movements. What do you think is the best way to ground our panthak work in guru-oriented, you know, like in a guru-oriented manner? Because I find it really difficult to continue doing panthak work in a lot of spaces, because it is really, really draining. But also, like, you know, in order to balance your mental space and in order to also know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think is really important as a Sikh. And in order to make sure we're always grounding our panthak work within, you know, the guru mindset, I find that like really difficult. So how do you guys navigate that?
So you're asking how do we navigate what's happening, the movements within the Gurmat framework?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can get started. I think it really comes down to your connection with the Guru. I mean, the idea is if there are things happening in the world and they're not affecting you, they're not impacting you, then the question must be raised, why or why not? And if they are impacting you, why are they? And if they're not, then why are they not? So if you look at the examples from Guru's era we provided, they actually they embraced controversies. They didn't really run away from it. Now the methodology they used, that was creative. That varied based on the issue at hand or the audience. So I think number one has to be very clear is your understanding of the Gurmat way. If you don't have, if you look for answers from Gurbani, okay, because that's the inspiration. if you find that, then you look for examples from our history. Are there some things that you can relate to get a better understanding of, like a precedent or something? And then you have to apply it to your life, because without the application, there isn't anything. So if let's say take Black Lives Matter, you know, if somebody were to ask you, why are you at that product, or why are you not at there? One should be able to respond to that. But in order to do that, you need to be honest with yourself and know what your relationship with your surrounding is. Because if you don't have a relationship with your surroundings, then probably it's not going to impact you. So
Yeah, I have something I can add.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that if I haven't, if that's sort of a generic answer, but I believe Kiran is going to probably has something more focused.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think the question was very relatable for me in terms of, I think Dandeep, you mentioned like bandwidth and how much you can spread yourself, or how many things that you can think about and how many things you can consider within the scope of your relationship to Guru, and how you can live those things out. And so that's definitely something personally that I have a hard time with. Like Hassan Minaj talked about, like his last episode of Patriot Act, having like 1,000 tabs open for everything that's going wrong in the world. And I think that's something that's difficult for me to manage. And we talked about this, I remember in the fall of last year with the farmers' protests. And as somebody who doesn't have a lot of family still in India, my connectivity and my ability to enact specific change somewhere like Punjab is difficult. And so I think this was a conversation with Pritpal Virji, where the consensus was sort of, there are things that we have more control over and have more influence over in our lives. Like if we're talking about food insecurity as a broad issue in Punjab, there's food insecurity in DC where I live. And so the principle of helping people, or of living out a principle that we find that we connect with through Sikhi, doesn't have to be all around the world, which I think is a hard pressure to relieve ourselves of. But I think that's how I try to think of it, is where are the places where I can physically show up and tangibly show up, that I have some semblance of control over, if that makes sense.
These two said it way better than I ever could, but I think the one thing, Tandeep, that I would add is the need for constant inspiration and rejuvenation. You know, growing up, I thought, oh, okay, I have to do Path because it's mandated, or, you know, someone told me to, or in order to be a good Sikh, that's something that's important to me. Whereas now, if and when I engage with Shabad Guru especially, that's a way for me to refresh myself, because sometimes this can be hard. You know, there's a lot of things that maybe not are going the right way, but to attack them in the spirit of Chardi Kala, for me, Bani and especially Shabad has been a huge way for me to kind of rejuvenate myself. The next question, we'll go to Mannat Kaur, and then we'll go to some of the ones in the chat. Manna?
Thank you. Pritpal Uncle was talking about how ritual without like decision change and attitude change is not really worth it. One thing I just struggle to explain to people, and I'd love to get your take on, is Guru Nanak Dev Ji rejected the Janayu, and I think throughout Sikhi we see these examples where our gurus reject rituals and idols, but then why do we keep our case? Why do we keep our kakar? What's the attitude change that happens through those? How does that influence our decision making and our relationship with the guru?
Yeah, I can handle that one. The key there was if the ceremony has no meaning to you, then it's worthless. Okay, but then you're just checking the box. But if you have meaning in the ceremony, and the ceremony actually the meaning of ceremony is translating into your life, into your everyday lifestyle, then it's meaningful. So, for example, you brought in the kakars. The kakars are actually gifts from the guru. So if one feels like mere te boj haga, man, I have to, oh my God, I don't want to keep this, but I have to keep this, then I think the perspective is very different than versus this is my gift from the guru. I treasure it, I value it, I love it, because to me it has meaning in my life. So I think the key becomes perspective, and the key becomes the meaning that's translating into your everyday life. If it's not, then the value just simply does not exist.
Nice. I really like that answer. Kiran Kaur, anything to add?
Yeah, I think a shabad that it's difficult to sometimes conceptualize which things are rituals, which things are traditions, which things have meaning. And so that's like, again, one thing that I think is great about the choice offered in Sikhi is how much optionality there is with that. And so I think there's a shabad that we talk about, Aarti. And so in Aarti, there's this conversation of doing Aarti physically and doing like it as a ritual. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji's criticism of Aarti isn't that like doing it is bad, but if it's an incomplete understanding of the world and used to replace real connectivity, then there's like something missing there. And so if you keep your gifts because somebody else told you to, or if you keep Panchkakar because somebody else told you to, then it might be a ritual. Then it might be something that you're just doing out of habit or for something else. And if you're doing it with meaning, and if you're doing it with you're out of your relationship with the Guru, or what you're trying to make of your relationship with your Guru, regardless of where you are on that path, then it's not. Then it's something that's real. And so I think the intentionality is something that's given a lot of weight in Sikhi, which is a gift.
Beautiful answer as well. Next question. There's nothing I can add to those two. Thank you for sharing those both. Anika Singh writes, could you share some of your personal examples of how you translate the Shabad wisdom in your life? And then she added on, and what are some of the challenges you face, like things that you understand intellectually but struggle to apply sometimes? Kiran, do you want to start with this one? It's in the chat if it's easier to read it that way.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, sure. So personally, in the last year with being home, I took the opportunity to learn a lot of kirtan from my 17-year-old cousin who's much better than I am. And so with her, I got to be exposed to a lot of new shabads and new wisdom that I didn't have a relationship with before. And I remember she sent me notes to learn Pura Nyaya Kare Kartar at the beginning of the pandemic. And Pura Nyaya was like perfect justice, or true justice is done by the Guru, Kare Kartar. And I remember at that time, it was about the pandemic. It was about the world shutting down and people losing their jobs and things going south for a lot of different communities. And it felt hard to find an explanation of justice, and it felt hard to identify silver linings. And so the point of the way I'm answering this question is that Shabad can change over the course of time, and your relationship to a piece of Shabad can change over the course of time, because the next time I came back to read it, it was during the Black Lives Matter protests. It was a few months later. And so like the concept of justice can change, and the way that it's centered in your life at any given moment can change. And so I think like that's how I would start with answering that question. I don't know how to say this is how I apply it and I know what I'm doing and this is exactly how it works. But in terms of the intellectual exercise of trying to internalize a message, that's what I tried to carry with me, like during those periods of time where I didn't feel like there was justice. And so it's just like, I don't know, it's a bit of an incomplete answer, but allowing Gurbani to change over time helps it feel like the timeless aspect of it. Yeah, that's how I would answer that. Pritpal, Reggie, George, you want to add anything?
Okay, I can just add from you're asking for some personal experience. So how you translate Shabad wisdom in your life. I can tell you, I actually count a lot on my close knit of circle. Because if I'm doing a proclamation that I love somebody, I love my Guru, then I'm actually opening myself for some critique as well. So proclamation doesn't really, proclamation something, it doesn't really deliver it doesn't really show anything. By saying that you love somebody or you're an honest person, it doesn't prove anything. So I rely a lot on reflection, and meaning that actually take time out for myself and what I did, does it parallel to what I'm proclamating, what I say? And in doing that, I take out time every day for myself in actually analyzing the decisions that I made or the way I spoke. Is that in consistence with what Shabad says? The other thing I can tell you on a practical level, I have those people are very close to me, and I'll tell you, my wife and my mother, they challenge me every day. They challenge me every day, and I know this. I may not just be sharing. Maybe I'm sharing too much. ਪਰ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਪੀਚਾਂ ਬੜੀ ਵੱਡੀਆਂ ਵੱਡੀਆਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹੋ, ਵਰਕਸ਼ਾਪ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫੈਸਿਲਿਟੇਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ, ਪਰ ਗੁੱਸਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ. So I think that tells me there's room for growth. If the people who are close to me are witnessing that in me, then I need to work on that myself. So that involves being vulnerable, but that's where growth occurs. If you're willing to take that criticism as well, and actually then apply constantly, keep chiseling it, that's, to me, that's real.
Answers as well. I'll share very briefly. Personal examples of how I translate Shabad wisdom in my life. I think, like Kiran, I feel that whatever issue I'm dealing with, the answer lies in whatever I'm reading in Gurbani. And for me, Shabad and learning Shabad and singing Shabad is a big part of that, because that's how I feel like I actually interact with Gurbani. So that's kind of my way of interfacing. But the challenges are then, how do I take it from my room and make it a reality in the world? And I think that can get hard to think about. In some ways you might know what's right, but the way to impact the world, especially, there's so few people who have the ability to think beyond just survival. And then there's even fewer who have the ability to think beyond, trying to climb whatever ladder there is. In a big way, Sikhi frees you and says, you got to focus on what's important. And it's not the transitory. It's not becoming necessarily the most wealthy person in the world. It's not, raising to the top of your job necessarily, but it's an impact in the world. And so the thing that I struggle with is, how do we turn these conversations into actionable things that can be done and things that I can control? Because it's also very overwhelming at times to think of all the different things that you could do or not doing. So for me, it's a process of wanting myself to be better while being gentle with myself that I'm trying, and that the Guru is really the only way that I'll figure that out. It's hard for me to figure it out myself. Next question is from Jujhaar Singh. How do you deal with people with different views of Sikhi that conflict with yours?
How to deal with the people with the conflicting views of Sikhi than yours? That's the question. I think the crux of this question I apply to myself is, you can't really control or impact too much what other person thinks. You do have some level of influence on how you think yourself. So I focus on how I react or how I act, because reactionary measures usually are not not fruitful. So the other thing is, you can't put Sikhi in a box. It's like trying to define Guru. We don't. We earlier, one of the slides we had, we don't have. Guru is beyond, description. Guru is beyond. You can't put a label of Guru is this, prophet, Guru is this. So I view that nobody can box up Sikhi. So the idea is, everybody has their own journey, and it's okay to have different interpretations. The idea is, if are you being honest with yourself and actually walking on the path which the Guru defined or as you interpret it? I think I would just focus on myself, that how do you deal with others? The worst thing you can do is actually get in an argument and get off track than what the person, what you define for yourself on the path that you wanted to walk on.
I'll take a stab at this and then Kiran, feel free. I think it starts with finding common ground. And I've kind of actually decided that in any sphere of life, the majority of times when I disagree with someone, if we want to resolve that, we both have to be willing to try and find some common ground. For Sikhs, that generally is the Guru Granth Sahib, right? So I do think there are actionable ways of interacting with other Sikhs whose views you differ from. But I think attacking it from a perspective of understanding, why do you believe this? Because views can come from a lot of things, including love for someone else who had certain views or the way you were raised, X, Y, Z. And so a big part of it for me is are we willing to try and find common ground together? And also, what can we decide on that then we can implement? I think strengthening ourselves as a community then will allow us to fulfill the promise of or the goal of Sikhi in revolutionizing all parts of our world. Get anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with that, with what you were saying about common ground. I mean, I think personally, I don't consider myself an authority on how other people should be doing the parts of Sikhi that I engage with, because mine has been the culmination of like a deeply personal life journey. Like it's something that I've been working on my whole life. And so if someone were to say like, I disagree with this, it's probably because we were raised differently or engaged with Sikhi differently or have a different viewpoint that was born out of something separate. And so, I mean, like Jujhaar said, there's always common ground. If we both say we're on the same path, then we definitely have something in common. And the way that we may go about it is going to be different. But arguing or trying to prove a point or try to say that one choice is better than another, I think negates I think something that we talk about at Sidak a lot is that one of the biggest themes in the Guru Granth Sahib, which is our common ground, is choice, and is like the way that you choose to engage with the world. And so that's how I try to look at it. Much easier said than done. I'm a very argumentative person, like don't get it twisted, but that's the way that I try to think about it and think about people who are different from us in the way that they walk the same path.
Let me give a historical example to better illustrate the point I think we're all trying to make, since I'm the history person here. We all know the Sakhi. When Guru Nanak, saw some things being happening, which he didn't agree with, this is what he did. Instead of giving water to the sun, he started giving water to his farms, and people said, what's wrong with this guy? What the hell are you doing, man? And he said, he played like, what are you doing? Well, I'm giving water to my field, which is several hundred miles away. And they're like, well, I'm giving it to the sun. He's like, what's further, your field or the sun? So that was his creativity. And I think we should learn from that. I think Guru Nanak had a much more profound effect on those individuals than he would have said, he didn't say all things like that. He didn't get in their face. He took the criticism himself. But that's the beauty of the Guru. That's the creativity of the Guru. And I would apply the same example in our life. If somebody does that, focus it on ourselves, your own creative nature.
Yeah, there's some excellent questions in the chat. Unfortunately, we only have 2 minutes left, so we're just going to do a brief wrap up. I'm sorry we can't get to more questions. And for others, feel free to keep talking in the chat. But we'll just take 1 minute each to do a quick wrap up. My wrap up is, I just want to say thank you. I feel like I've learned a lot from here. I know the Q&A was directed at us, but I'm looking forward to today when we can all hear from the rest of you as to what you think and then learn from those perspectives. So thank you for being so engaged, especially remotely. Pritpal Singh, you want to talk next?
Yes, thank you again for giving us an opportunity to share with you all what Guru, the role of Guru in our life is. And I know I enjoy all of these, and I really hope one day we can meet in person. And this is just a glimpse of what happens at Sidak.
Yep, same as the other two. Thank you guys for being open with us and for participating in the conversation as thoroughly as you did. You'll see me again in the second session, so we'll be back. But this was really lovely, and thank you for taking the space and making space for each other.
So thank you, Pritpal Singh, Jujhaar Singh, and Kiran Kaur. That was really wonderful as your presentation was, and I want to clear that. So the part, what happened in the chat, in your Q&A, the participation of our participants was the jewel. That is what Sidak is about. And I'm so glad that the participants, felt comfortable enough to ask you these questions, and they were tough because a lot of them were personal. Kiran, I love the fact, argumentative, yes, well, you'll see that on that side of her at Sidak. You saw Pritpal being that, yes, the way he shares the message of Guru Nanak Sahib is rather casual, but interesting. It makes you think. I don't think I've heard too many people talk about Guru Nanak Sahib in that light, but we love you too, Pritpal. Thank you for keeping us grounded and making it real. And Jujhaar, the thinker, the ponderer. Okay, so how do we think about this intellectually? So you got a glimpse into their personalities of what the experience of the facilitators, and each facilitator at Sidak brings that, a part of them to Sidak. So you get a smorgasbord to say, look at their experiences. Now, what is it that I like about it, and what is it that I don't like about them? And that's what life is all about. And that's the journey. So thank you to the three presenters for your incredible presentation and being so open and engaging with our participants. Sidak can't do without you. Sidak is you, and you are Sidak. And thank you for that. And now we have put together a special 12-minute video presentation for you on our beloved ninth Pacha, the ninth sovereign, Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib, Shrishti Chadar, the protector of humanity. The Guru has shown the way to his beloved Sikhs, the way we need to stand for justice, to be the voice of the voiceless, to be the diplomats, to be the peace brokers in every and any conflict, and so much more. So on this 400th Prakash Purab, Illumination Day of Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib, we remember, we revere, and we celebrate together as a Sangat in gratitude. So do take some time and enjoy this video while you can continue on the chat, because there were incredible questions there, and I'm sure our participants and the panelists will engage in that. So Anu, please play the video.
These hukamname are attributed to Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib around 1670. The style of writing is known as Nastaliq calligraphy, using the Gurmukhi alphabet. The letters are stylized and the vowel sounds are modified. These hukamname identify some of the early Sikh followers of the Guru, Bhai Dayal Das, who was martyred before the Guru, Bhai Sibhu, Seth Kalyanmal, and others. They are written to the Sangat, congregation of Banaras, acknowledging receipt of donations.
I hope you enjoyed that video as we come back from our back into our session for session 2. Our next session is on connecting through Shabad. And today our presenters for this session will be Diveesh Singh, who is a Sidak alumni of 2017 as well as 2018, and actually came back in 2019 as a facilitator and a TA for Sikhi 101. I've had the pleasure of working with Diveesh since 2017, and I look forward to this presentation today with all of you. We also have Kiran Kaur from our previous presentation as well, and she'll be joining us here. As mentioned, she is also an alumni, and so this session is entirely run by our alumni. So you'll get to see the sorts of the background that they've gained at Sidak and how it comes to play within this session. Satprit Kaur is also someone that I met at Sidak in 2014. She's a fellow teacher, and so we've connected on many levels through our work with at Sidak as well as through teaching. And so you can see that although we live hours away from each other, she's close to Seattle and I'm closer to Vancouver, Sidak really brought us together. We wouldn't have met each other otherwise. And so we've been able to connect, as I said, not only about this, but we've been talking about our struggles as teachers and pandemic and all sorts of things. And so you do really make these great connections at Sidak. Also, during this session, Jasleen Kaur will be joining us as well. Jasleen Kaur is a alumni of 2012 and 2017. She's currently a researcher with the Sikh Research Institute and one of the presenters or facilitators for Sikhi 201. Jasleen has been working on the Guru Granth Sahib project as a researcher, and so with this session, you will be looking at Gurbani and the connection through Shabad, and Jasleen's insights that she brings in from the project, the Guru Granth Sahib project, as well as what she has learned at Sidak will definitely be reflected in this. As mentioned, this session is all on connecting through Shabad. It's going to be quite personal. And as you'll get to see, our presenters will share a bit about how they've connected on a personal level with Shabad, their connection to Guru, and you will also get the chance to experience that for yourself as well. So I'm excited for all of you to participate in this session, and just remember that this is a safe space, that this is a learning environment for all of you, and please enjoy. So I will turn this over to our presentation team.
Cool. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I think we're just getting the slides up. Satprit, I think, has them. Cool. All right. So as Anu mentioned, this is a workshop where we're going to try to take a continuation of what we were talking about in the last session with cultivating a relationship with oneness and with Guru, and do this in a personally reflective way and engage with some Gurbani. So this workshop is going to ask you to sit with Bani, and it doesn't matter if you've never attempted translating or if this is something completely new to you. It's all a journey and everybody is somewhere along it. And so there's no experience required. And so next slide, please. We'll go to the beginning. So what is translating? What is interpreting? What is transcreating? And sorry, just had a glitch there. Okay, can you hear me still, Diveesh? Cool. Sorry, I'll just start that slide again. So this is an introduction to translation, interpretation, and transcreation. And so these are 3 different words that we use to understand what it means to engage with Gurbani across different languages. What is the experience of moving between one or the other? And transcreating is a word that we often use at Sidak to sort of de-emphasize the necessity for literal translation and make you think about what are the words sort of between the lines and how can we interpret this in a way that feels personal, that feels like it's the voice in my head, as opposed to like another author or another translator. So with any task like this, there is subjectivity. This is a human practice. The goal isn't for anything to be perfect. That is only found in the original Bani, the perfection. So we're going to try and be aware of our angles and our perspectives and what we may bring to the table as sort of like a tint to our translations with a few of these common challenges. So I think Diveesh is going to kick us off with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Kiran. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So what kinds of limitations do we face during translation, and how does that affect our interpretations? Well, for example, we find that in the Sikhi to the Max translations, they have some amount of influence from like Abrahamic religions. We find that Har, Guru, or any other way to address the divine has been translated to Lord. You know, the word Lord holds certain connotations and evokes certain images in the reader's head versus other choices, divine, et cetera, et cetera. Similarly, we'll also see translations that have some Hindu influences there, some Indic influences, dharmic influences, yogic influences. But beyond the external religious influence, we're also just inherently limited by just the nature of going from language to language. You know, when we try to create something in a new language, we lose some of the original nuance, the implications, since we're limited by the expressive power of the target language. So how, for example, do we capture the essence of Balahari in just a few words, right? There's a lot behind it. In fact, when authors write these translations, they're inherently bringing some of their own experiences and perspectives in there as well. And that's something we have to understand when trying to interpret those translations. Is the writer coming from a political angle, an academic angle, a spiritual one? These all are things that we have to keep in mind when we read these translations. And everyone has these things that they bring when they write translations. Sikhi to the Max authors, Sikhi, anyone. And these limitations aren't necessarily a bad thing, right? We have to focus on that. Even though we have these limitations, the end goal is that we want the Bani to be understandable and we want it to be relevant. And finally, at the end of the day, right, Shabad is infinite and we're basically limited by the bounds of our own consciousness. We're simply just finite. And Bani can't be expressed in one translation, but being limited does not mean that we shouldn't attempt to translate. We should constantly be exploring, we should constantly be engaging, and through this engagement is how we develop. And that's what leads to growth. And it's key to the sort of, I guess, experiential component of interacting with Shabad. Next slide, please. So I've been mentioning a fair amount of limitations and translations based on varying from author to author and people bringing in their personal sort of experiences into the mix. So let's take a few of these translations actually side by side and talk a little bit about the differences. So the first thing that stuck out to me was, if you look at the first paragraph, how can I go to enjoy my husband, Lord? That's in the Sikhi to the Max translation. In this case, we use the word Lord. The usage of the word Lord here takes away from that, that meaning that we get from divine instead, and we see that Abrahamic influence in there. Also in the second paragraph, here's somewhere we can talk a little bit more about this idea of how, despite the limitations, we're still getting to a point where the Shabad becomes a little bit more relevant. You know, if you look at this literal translation in the Sikhi to the Max one, cranes streaking overhead in the sky. But what does that actually mean, right? Like, am I this metaphorical crane? Like, why am I shrieking? Like, what is this? And so if you take a look at the rightmost column in the transcreation, you'll note this idea of crane shrieking becomes a little bit more relevant when you actually dig down and try to explain the analogy. Growing old and graying hairs is a much more relatable idea for us. finally, in the last paragraph, if you take a look at the middle column, you can see this idea of comparing Suhagan and Duhagan. And the first thing I want to point out is that in the Sikhi to the Max translation, we see Suhagan referred to as virtuous soul bride and Duhagan is unworthy. But in the Guru Granth Sahib Project translation, we actually see them just use the words Duhagan and Suhagan. So why didn't they translate it? They just used the original words. So in some cases, there's actually so much cultural context behind the word that it's actually difficult to capture that full meaning in the sentence itself. In those cases, it's been perfectly acceptable to just use the original word and then have a footnote that goes into greater detail. I guess finally, we can take this a little bit further. Don't want to take too much time, but if you read the translation on the left in the last paragraph, you give all your knights to the virtuous soul brides. I know that I am unworthy, but isn't there a knight for me as well? So when I read this translation, I see this contrast of the virtuous soul bride and someone who is unworthy. And the virtuous soul bride has access to these knights, but the unworthy one doesn't, or wonders whether it's actually available for her. So I got a little bit confused. I was like, what is this virtuous soul bride? You know, am I unworthy? Like, am I left wondering whether or not there is a knight for me? And if you look at the Guru Granth Sahib Project one, they paint a slightly different picture. This idea of knight becomes grace. You see this line, grant me, the separated seeker, a moment of grace as well. And so we notice that like the difference here is that the Duhagan is saying, you know, grant me this moment of grace. You know, I may not be perfect, but I still have that ability to ask for that grace. And it's basically a core idea in Sikhi that, you know, the grace is all around us. I just have to be willing to feel it. So I guess the point that I'm trying to illustrate here is that if you look at different translations, you'll get a very different, not a very different idea, but you'll get slightly different nuances across them. And at the end of the day, we want these translations to be not only understandable, but also relevant. And in the pursuit of trying to make these more accessible, that is where our growth is going to be. So next slide, please.
Cool. So I'm going to address a couple other things. One is common error. So in this case, it's referring to the incorrect superimposing of context that may or may not have existed in the original Bani that we are applying from our own perspectives. And so I've put some examples here from Iyer Bani translations, because I know that's a really common, that's how I personally use the most common translation that I have access to. So this issue is most commonly seen when we're trying to translate names or descriptions of the divine or of Guru. And so the first one is Ram. And so the first example that I've put here is Ram. And so Ram can be the Hindu word for God, Ram, or it could be Ram, the historical Ram, the Ram and Sita, or in this case of the first look that I've put here with Ramaya, that's a completely different description of God that might not involve any of those other ones. And so that Ramaya sometimes means like the charmer or someone who's immersed, Ramya, in love. And so there's an entire story that's being conveyed in a word to describe the divine that's lost if you just write God or Lord or Master or any of those things. Same thing with Bhagwan, that's the next example, where that is the Hindu word for God in some cases, but also it means the adorable, that one that is adored. And so we sometimes can lose these like broader, really deep translations of the divine or how it might exist in a particular context when we use a simple English word. And sometimes that's just the case. Sometimes there isn't one English word for word that can convey the meaning, which is what Diveesh was talking about with sometimes the original words or string of words is better. Next slide, please. The next common thing that we see is gender being ascribed where it's not necessary oftentimes. So this is most common with seeing he superimposed into lines that don't necessarily have pronouns or don't have gender at all. So the gurus, in their infinite capacity to write from different perspectives, wrote from masculine and feminine and gender neutral and gender transcendent perspectives that sometimes had nothing to do with a gendered and socialized body, but rather just a human experience. And so adding in he where it doesn't necessarily belong can tint the translation to mean something different. And so the example that I've put here is a shabad that uses the word ape. And so ape, just as it is in Punjabi, is oneself. is a reflexive pronoun for the self. And so there is obviously no gender ascribed to that if it's just to the generic oneself, but in the translation it's put as he himself. And so that's again something to consider when we're reading it, because as Diveesh mentioned, there's no incorrect ascription of bias or incorrect inclusion of bias, because anyone who attempts translating is going to carry their life experiences into the way that they speak and the way that they work. But from an organizational level, if you're Sikhi to the max, if you're Agrabani, if you're an institution that disseminates this as like academic material or a way for other people to learn, there's heavy implication when you gender things heavily or when you add in other religious traditions influence in heavily. So yeah, just like extra things to think about as you go about reading other translations and to consider when you attempt your own. And Satprit is the next one.
So another thing that has an impact on translation and transcreation is the use of metaphysical symbolism. So sometimes when you translate a word into English literally, then you can lose some of the deeper meaning that's behind the concept. So for example, in Asakivar, it says, Nanak Guru na chetani, man apne suchet, chotte til buar sunye andar khet. If you were to roughly translate this line literally, it would be about how those who don't understand, or those who don't remember the Guru, and those that think of themselves as super smart and super clever are like rotten sesame seed plants that are abandoned in the field. So when I consider that translation literally, it's a little challenging for me to make sense of it, at least for myself. And there's obviously a deeper meaning behind that and deeper meaning behind that symbolism as well. And we intentionally are using the term metaphysical symbolism instead of just symbolism. And this is because to me, symbolism means that there's a deeper meaning behind the translation beyond the literal meaning. And symbolism is kind of about a comparison of one thing to another thing, like a human is like a seed. However, using the term metaphysical symbolism attaches a deeper, expansive context to the thing that's being compared. So it suggests that there's not only a deeper meaning, but that there is a divine message behind that deeper meaning. So when I think about the deeper meaning behind this line, it makes me think about questions like, what is needed to cultivate the seed in this analogy? What does it mean to be left out in the field? What does it represent if the seed is rotten? What are the implications of that? What is representing the field in this analogy? And where does the divine fit into this metaphor? And where do we as humans fit into this metaphor? And what does this line make us consider about the relationship between us and the Guru? So therefore, as important as the literal translation is, it is also important to not lose sight of the deeper metaphysical symbolism in the process of making sense of Gurbani for ourselves.
Okay, so now that we've sort of set the scene for what translating can look like and common slants that show up in such an exercise, we're going to do an activity and have all of you attempt a piece of translation. So again, I emphasize that there are no correct answers, but I think that there's something very profound about working with a line of Bani until the words that you're using and the words that you're saying to explain it to yourself or in your own voice, as opposed to somebody else telling you what something means. And that is a journey, and that's a time-consuming exercise to find your voice as it presents itself in Gurbani. But I think it's something that can make the connection much more personal. And so Sikhi to the Max and iGurbani and the Guru Granth Sahib Project and online dictionaries, any of those things are tools and ones that I definitely would encourage using and still use. But hearing something in your own voice after going through that process is something that does feel connective. And so Asakivar is the Bani that we're going to start with, and that's what the example that Satprit was just talking about comes from. The reason we chose Asakivar is because one is it's something that we work with at Sidak, and before I went to Sidak, I had never read Asakivar. I had never heard it before. I had no experience with it as a Bani, but it really is what I think could be considered a seminal text of Sikh theology. In it, Guru Nanak Sahib talks about the normal, the accepted, the traditional, the ritualistic, whatever was presented at the time that he was in this world, and shatters the notions of like what we're doing Is it meaningful? What we're doing, is it right? What we're doing, is it in line with oneness? And it's incredible to engage with it and to see how revolutionary and how radical he was for the time that he was in. It's also a Sankti Bani, meaning that it's meant to be done in Sangat, that's meant to be done in community. And every Gurdwara everywhere around the world does this in the morning. And so we thought it would be a good place to start. So Asa Ki Baar has 24 stanzas, and we're just going to touch the first today. And within that, there's a few couplets, and we're going to work through the first together and then give you some tools to work through the rest. So Diveesh is going to take us through the first example.
Yeah, so just some quick logistical things before we go into that. So for the translation workshops, you'll all be going out to breakout rooms of approximately 8 people, and you'll be translating, you'll be focusing primarily on the second couplet of the first chakka in Asa Ki Baar. And you'll have to actively join the breakout room when the Zoom notification comes up, but we can go into that a little bit later. So if you take a look at the chat, we've sent out a Google Doc link, which allows you to make a copy and add your own notes. Also, in case you don't have a Google account, we've also included a link to a PDF that you can just download. And so you can at least have access to the content that will help you do this exercise, and feel free to type up your notes or translations in a separate document or notes app or whatever you want. So we've provided, the way it works is we've provided each of the lines in the first chakka in both Gurmukhi and English, as well as the translations of each of the individual words themselves. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide, sorry. Yeah, and so we have the translations as well as the individual words themselves, of the individual words themselves, sorry. And your job is to basically string them together in a translation. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry, keep it on this one. So if you take a look, right, like if we take a look at just the first tuk or first segment, Balihari Gur Apne. So I see Balihari and I look in the word bank. Okay, Balihari is sacrifice or adoration. Okay, then Gur Apne. Gur is guru or wisdom. Apne means to my. So I can sort of, okay, I can combine that into to my. So you can kind of see how this stringing together process works. And you basically are doing that for all the lines that we've provided. Again, primarily focusing on the second couplet. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, the interesting aspect of this is sort of how you choose to string them together. So Satprit, Kiran, and I, we had all access to all of the same resources, all the same word bank, everything. Yet when we made the translations on our own, you know, they have generally maybe like the same idea, but if you look at the words we use to express different concepts, how we phrase the sentence, it is very different. And I feel like that's the beautiful part of translation, right? Like I personally had to sit for maybe 10 minutes and figure out, okay, how do I actually want to describe Balihari? Like, is sacrifice, is it adoration? How do I really capture that nuance? And I guess I ended up settling on, I lovingly give my whole self. But I guess this goes to show that, right? Like it's not just this idea of, okay, this word means this, I'm going to put this. It's really like trying to understand how this speaks to you and how you can take these literal translations and turn that into something that you actually resonate with. Cool. Next slide.
So in addition to having the support of the glossary, you will also have the support of your fellow participants. So I would encourage you all to work together and share your ideas with each other so you can bounce ideas off one another and hear multiple perspectives. So since we're working in groups, we'd like to have a couple of norms for all of us to follow. So first of all, we are all learning together. We are all learning. So please make space for people to feel safe and to feel comfortable engaging and to share their ideas. So please make space. Secondly, we all have the divine force within us, and we have really important insights to share. So please try to be brave and engage in this activity. And we encourage you to take space and share with others as well. So this activity is both collaborative as well as deeply personal. So please value the ideas of others while also valuing your own. There is no one right answer to this activity. It is okay and expected and actually necessary to have slightly different transcreations. And we also want to mention that it is okay to have moments of silence as people take time to reflect during this activity. It could be helpful to give folks in your group a couple minutes to think individually before coming together as a group to share out loud. So it is okay to have some reflection time as well. And so to help us engage in this activity, we're going to ask that a couple folks within your breakout room volunteer for the following groups just to support your group. So first, we would love for one person to be the screen sharer. So we'd like this person to share their screen on Zoom so everyone in the breakout room can see the activity at the same time. We'd also like one person to be the recorder. So we'd like for you to write down your group's ideas. Each person can write down their own ideas on their own activity sheet, but it would be great if the recorder could write down their group's ideas as a whole so that we have it when we come back as a large group, because we're going to ask you to share out about the second slok. We'd also like one person to be a reporter. So this person's going to share your group's ideas out loud at the end about the second slok. And then we'd also like someone in your group to be the floor manager. So we'd like this person to help make sure that everyone in your group has a chance to share if they'd like to, and invite people into the conversation. So-and-so, what do you think? So as you all are doing this, we will be hopping into your rooms if you have any questions or need any assistance, but also please don't hesitate to click the Ask for Help button if you need anything. So your goal for this activity is to gain a deeper understanding of Gurbani for yourself. So it is okay if you don't finish the entire workbook. We actually don't expect you to, but we would really like for you to make sure that you engage with the second slok especially. So we would rather that you spend time being thoughtful about translating and making meaning for yourselves rather than rushing through. So we intentionally gave you more than we thought you could finish in this time, just so you could also continue this process individually after the session is over. So with that, at this time, you should be getting a prompt to join your breakout room. So please click on that and good luck. Thank you all so much for engaging in this process with one another. I had the privilege of listening to a really amazing conversation in the group that I was in, and I'm sure other groups had great conversations too. So truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your bravery and your engagement and your thoughtfulness while engaging in this process. And so what we'd like to do now is have a little bit of time to hear from several different groups so you can hear across groups how you were making meaning for yourselves. So what you'll see right now in the chat is a link, pardon me, you'll see a link to the Padlet in the chat. And so what we'd like for you to do is the recorder in your group, if you could please write down what your group came up with in your breakout room, that would be great. If your group was able to get to the second slok of Jeso Chanda Ogovehe, if you could share that, that would be awesome. But if you didn't get there, no worries, just share what you got, and that's totally fine. And for the second column of the Padlet, there is another question. So the second question on the Padlet is, did you encounter any of the common challenges from the beginning? And if so, briefly describe what the challenge was while your group was doing this process. While recorders are recording for the first column and while everyone is reflecting for the second column, I'd love to have a couple people share out from your breakout room. So reporters, if you wouldn't mind sharing out, what were some of the translations and transcreations that your group came up with? And if you're able to share the second slok, awesome. If you didn't get to that, no worries to share what you all came up with. So with that, would breakout room 1 be willing to share out first? Okay, no worries. You can totally, we can come back to breakout room 1. Is there a group that would like to get us started?
Mannat and I we can do group 4.
Perfect, thank you.
So for Chakka 1, we got to another Chakka, but I think Puneet Singh has, he was a reporter, so he has it written. But I can see the first Chakka on my screen, so I can start with that. We came up with the combined light of 1,000 suns radiating with hundreds of moons in the sky. And despite the presence of this physical light, without the guru, there will always be extreme spiritual darkness. So what we found ourselves coming to was a difference between physical light and spiritual light. And we wanted to make that distinction in our translation. And then what we were talking about was that there might be the light of 100 moons or 1,000 suns, or and 1,000 suns. We talked a little bit about the or and. There will always be darkness without guru's light. And I think that one challenge that we found ourselves coming to a lot, but I think our team did a really, we had a really good way of going around it, was we kept on bumping into pronouns and us using those or it's and theys, but we were trying to not use that. So definitely in some of our other Chakka definitions or transcreations, we were trying to not, bump into those, but that was definitely challenging.
Thank you so much for sharing. Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, I was just gonna say, Mannat, if we can have Puneet bring up the other Chakka, we can talk about that. Unless you guys want to do that later.
Slok 2 is there. I see it on the screen.
Yeah, I think it's in the Padlet. We were just spending some time talking about why Guru Sahib specifically chose to use the sesame seed in this slok, and how it's sort of the idea of illusion, and you could be filled with the seed inside, or you could be filled with swa or ash. And we also talked about the idea of following Guru's mat versus manmat, and how that can lead you down 2 different roads.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I love the perspective that you all are bringing into this. So thank you. Would another group like to follow up? So thank you, breakout room 4.
Sorry, I think my group might have been group 1. We just didn't realize. I think so for ours, for the beginning, the first line of Jai So Chanda Ugve Suraj Chade Hazar. So I think ours was, this part was really literal, and we were thinking if hundreds of moons rise, then thousands of suns will also rise. And this idea of literally that is what kind of what happens. There's all this natural light that happens. It's a part of life that happens daily. And then the next line is Ette chanan hundia gurbin gor andar. So it's despite all this, literally despite the presence of all this light, without the guru's wisdom, there's extreme darkness and ignorance. So all this light happens, but without the guru's wisdom, without the guru, we are all left in this darkness. And I think beyond a spiritual one, just generally a darkness within the mind, and a general ignorance of the true meaning of life, I guess you could say. And this idea of being aware, both spiritually aware, but just aware in general of life. So I think, beyond nature's light, without the guru, we're living in this darkness within our mind. So
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, and for your reflections with that.
It's crazy how the same lines are eliciting very different understandings or different interpretations, and that's beautiful.
I think Angad Singh, are you raising your hand? I can unmute.
Yes, I am. Somehow I'm not able to start my video. I don't know.
Oh, it's not for you.
Yeah, I wasn't able to do in the session. I mean, in the breakout area as well. I think I overpowered the breakout area as well. So Divesh, I would like to take this opportunity and to just share what we discussed there as well. So we spent a lot of time on the first salok. I don't know if we had to start with the second salok, but we started with the first one, and we did a lot of brainstorming on that, and the immediate discussion that came were starting from the purpose of life. Somewhere we together felt that Jin Manas Te Devte Kiye is explaining and sharing us uh, the the wall that we have between us as humans, manifestation, and the Jot, and kiv sichara hoye kiv kude tutte pal, and to break that wall is something that Akal Purakh doesn't have a designated time that okay you have to read so many banis, you have to do so many taps, because in the Hindu dharma it is written in all of those Vedas that there are certain number of japs that you have to do to attain a certain riddhi siddhi and a state of being. But Guru is helping us that he's so powerful that it would take not just a blink of an eye for the Lord to break that wall for us. And then the first line actually brought us discussion on the word Balihari. Yes, we had for the second question that we have in the screen, that were there any challenges that we faced or the limitations that we faced while understanding any word? Yes, Bilahari was the word, wherein as a group we thought that a sacrifice and adoration was somewhere not being related. But I think the insights brought to that that whenever we adore someone, we by default in prem that we balihare to that person, vare vare jana us paramatma te, and kede paramatma te jo mera apna hai. I mean, so that was balihari gur apne. So those were the words that brought our attention. Then we got the opportunity for a few minutes to go to Je So Chanda Ugwe, Suraj Chade Hajar, Ite Chanan Hondeya Gurbir Kod Handar, and we tried to link this salok with the upper one. That now what Guru is explaining to us is that okay, that Guru is ever capable to transform us from Manas to the Jot Sarup, but there are so many other communities, so many other dharmas, so many other ways, so many other riddhi siddhi and these chanans out there who would make you believe that okay, do this yoga asana or do this kind of meditation practice, and that's when you would go inside yourself and you would be able to attain and experience the Lord. So we interpreted the moon and the Suraj and the Chanan that was already present there was different ways of getting the experience of Lord, which were already there. But what Akal Purkh, what Nanak Pasha is saying, that no matter so many, whatever ways are available there, without the true Guru, without the Shabad of the Guru, without his name, these all chanans are just nothing. They're just not taking you to the right direction. So we just related that the Devta that Jot Sarup the first is doing, the Kalpurk is doing, is again because of him only, that because of the Guru Shabad only, that can be attained. He's just reiterating the stuff and making us believe that don't fall into the trap of if someone is selling the idea that I would transform you to Manas to Devta, please don't go to that trap and bring yourselves together to the Guru and to the prem of Akal Purakh and Guru Granth Sahib Ji. So I think I concluded the session here. Divesh, if you had anything else to please share, please do that. But this is something that we brainstormed and discussed.
Yeah, no, thanks, Angad. That was very, we had a very in-depth discussion about this portion. Should we maybe wrap up this discussion of this part and maybe go on to more of the like common challenges area, if anyone had more thoughts on that, or if anyone else wanted.
Oh, yeah, I think this is actually a perfect segue, because what Angad was just talking about that's, I mean, that is metaphysical symbolism. That is an example of that, what we were talking about with what Satprit was exploring earlier, where if Guru is light, is the symbol, like what is the deeper meaning? That there could be other paths that are illuminated doesn't mean that everyone is the one that we're looking for, things like that. And so that was a great segue into the next question about if any of the things that we talked about showed up. I don't know if anyone put those in the Padlet, but if anyone came across any of the things that we had talked about with bias, or about like other traditions or gender, or any of the ways that we had talked about bringing our personal context into our translation, if anyone had anything to add. I see someone has a hand up. Not very well.
Yes, I
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Kiran. Thanks everybody else who's here. We were in group number 2 and we did, sorry, I'm not answering your question. I'm just wanted to give a little bit of context in terms of what our team discussed as well. So we did Mahala Duja, which was, as we've already discussed, you know, the literal translation we talked about was, you know, if there are 100 moons arise, thousands of sun ascends, despite so many light sources, there will still be darkness without the guru. And as you mentioned, and as others have mentioned, that the deeper thing that we really dived into was like, what is really guru, right? What is, because in the translation it said guru was, it said it's a guru, sorry, gur is guru, and guru is also, it said wisdom. So we had a deeper conversation about that, because when we think about guru, we always think about something that's outside of us, that's something external, that's something physical. And in this context, you know, we discussed that the suns and the moons represent an external light, and it's talking about an internal light as well, which is the guru's wisdom, which can be physical, it can be non-physical, it's just anything that's going to help us, you know, lead the way and live a better life and understand the true meaning of what this life is all about. And it can come in so many different forms. So we really dived deeper into that, and it was a really thoughtful and engaging conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, there's so much there, right? Like, and I like this sort of contrast of the external light that you brought up versus the sort of, I guess, internal light, and how we go about, you know, exploring that, and how we go about sort of searching for that internal light, despite, you know, it not being, I guess, despite all these like other external kinds of lights, you know, how do we sort of value that internal light? So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Because this is extremely important, because we talk about, when we talk about guru, even in this case, when we think about it, we still think about something outside, or like it's something outside that's going to bring light. And then the gurus, the only thing they taught us was there's a light within you, recognize that. And I think Any Kaur, you know, she had brought that up last time in the conference, which said, Man tu jot sarup hai apna mood pachan. And that's the true light that the gurus are trying to show us.
If I could just weigh in a little bit on something that I got to sort of witness a little bit of a conversation about, was the sesame seed. And have we gotten there yet? Can I go there? Okay. Yeah, so the question of like why the sesame seed came up, and somebody had just listened to some kata or something that was about how sesame seeds are specifically like used, maybe probably because when we look at them, we might not know like what the sort of internal state is of the sesame seed. Like sesame seeds that are rotten can still bloom and sort of appear to be fine. And so the like symbolism of that was discussed very briefly, but I thought that was like it was like watching a replay of what like the Guru Granth Sahib team talked about when we were parsing that through too. So that was kind of cool of like, what is the implication there? And then a follow-up that was made was the word barren was added in front of field. They said the field was barren. And then somebody else said, but I don't think that that is true, because if we say that the feel is barren, like what is that insinuating? Is it insinuating that like we are past the point of no return? Like once you're kind of rotting on the inside or rotten on the inside, then there's no going back? Or is there always like potential for some kind of blooming that is indicative of like a healthy seed? Is that like still possible? And so even though it was like very brief in our conversation or in their conversation that I got to witness, it was like very, yeah, it was really lovely to see them think more about like even the small words that we're adding in or like changing, what those implications are and how that relates to like larger ideas that we have, you know, in the Sikh paradigm of like what grace is and what growth is on all of our journeys. So yeah, that was just something I wanted to add.
There's, as always, there is a lot to break down in each slogan. I think Kiran was also like, I don't know if it was like she brought it up in the presentation or if it was just like something we were talking about, but there's like so much, there's just so much to unpack with Asakiwala, and that's why it's like another really good Bani to explore with this sort of exercise as well, right? Like, because you can take the literal, but then you can also like go really deep like Jasleen went. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jasleen. So should we maybe move on to some more free-form discussion?
Yeah, so cool. So we can, the last chunk of this session is just going to be a little bit of a reflective discussion on how this exercise went for you, because for some people, I'm sure it was the first time doing it. And for some people, maybe it was somewhere along your journey of translating. And so given that, and given we all went through the same thing, we just want to know how that was as like an emotional experience, if it was something that was empowering or something that felt intimidating or something that's maybe now a little less intimidating. But anyone is welcome to turn their camera on and or raise their hand or however you would like, but we do want to hear what it was like. Something easy, something difficult, something new, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I had at least one comment in that when our group started doing some of the translations, we found that we originally started by trying to translate each word and try to identify, okay, which one of these words most accurately represents potentially the emotion that we're trying to get out of this line. And by trying to like identify each word one at a time, it was kind of, at least I found it kind of difficult to string them together in some coherent way. And it was much more useful to try and read the entire line. I don't know if this really makes sense, but like reading the entire line made and like trying to identify like the major words of a line and their relationship with one another kind of helps making translations flow much better, or at least make them make more sense to what the message is that's trying to be delivered there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it can be intimidating to look at lines in their entirety because it's like, this is a whole string of words that I don't know. But I think somebody asked a question in the chat about like inserting Guru's context versus personal context and like how to weigh the two together and make sure we're not over inserting our own or under inserting the Guru's. And so I think that's like part of that balance is to look at things in their entirety and try not to cherry pick where possible, because isolating lines on their own can create different versions of the story. And I don't think it's something to like worry about where it's like, oh my God, is this too personal? Because I think that's part of the point. Like it's supposed to be your engagement with Bani and your personal journey. So kind of answered that question there, but there's a couple people who have their hands raised. I don't know who was first. Diveesh, if you want to take that.
Yeah, I think Angad was first. Angad, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, so, okay. I'll just start my webcam. Okay. So the last 90 minutes have been really amazing for me. I have to accept that I am too weak in history, in Sikh history especially. I have bought a lot of books, but I honestly don't read them. I am more inclined towards reading Shabad, Guru Granth Sahib Ji, their meanings, but I somewhere realized between these 90 minutes that how important is reading Sikh history, wherein we actually see how to practically implement the meanings. Because today what the challenge that we are talking about is that suppose if we understand Punjabi, Gurbani is something that you could relate to it, and certain words are so easy and we use in our daily lives. But when we try to interpret in English language, especially from India I am, so since this is not what the common language we have, so that's where the challenge comes up for translating and believing it, and the wordplay that comes in. Although I have all those apps, but I never read the English version because because of my, you can say, low vocabulary, or probably I just don't relate to it somewhere. Because if I say the word Sajanada, I mean, like, how on earth can any language just, explain the meaning of Sajanara? So these 90 minutes has helped me really to answer the alarming question with which I came to this session, was that how practically I can implement Gurbani in my life. That today, if I say that Jeso Chanda Gue, for me, what is the Chand today? What is the Suraj for me today? And how that Guru is helping me, to understand that that wherever you are being attached is not something which is right, and you should be attaching to something else. Not attaching, I mean, sorry for using those words, but to be inclined to the Guru. And I felt that these meanings keep on changing. As a child it will be different meaning, and uh, if you have friends, it will be a different meaning for you. When you are at the parental age, it will be different. So it's so personal. I think someone also mentioned here that it's so personal. And one thing also I learned, that we uh, there are meanings which are written by the professors as well. Professor Sahib Singh ji, of course, he had his own avastha, and I can surely get inspired from that avastha. But currently there will be chances that I will not be able to relate to it. So just understand the basic meaning, basic understanding, and then go back inside your mind and ask the Guru, and do ardas to Guru, that Guru, please help me understand this. So these 90 minutes have been really, really amazing, and thank you everyone for this opportunity. And I love these brainstorming session. I don't know why. If you guys could please arrange these sessions, let's just do something sort of that, one Shabad, 2 lines, and let everyone brainstorm, bring their personal contexts, and just learn from it. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Angad. Yeah, that I'm glad that this is an activity that resonated with you, and you touched on a really important point about, the Shabad changes as you grow older and you have different experiences, and that's kind of where that personal angle comes from. I want to give other people a chance to talk as well. So Kumar Beer, I think you had your hand up for a while, so go ahead and chime in.
I'm gonna let Kola speak first. She was in my group, and the thing that I was gonna say, she actually spoke first. So I'm gonna let her go ahead first.
Thank you so much, Kumar Beer. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for arranging this. This is very special to me, as this is my first time to reading Gurbani like properly. I haven't done that before, so this wasn't easy. Like, it took me more time to understand things than the other participants, I think so. So, but it's really, I'm really feeling empowered. So thank you so much. And I'll definitely want to join more sessions like this, and I hope to be in touch.
Yeah, no, and again, right, like it's a very personal thing. There's no like, this person is better than me, or they've done this before, so they're like, it's all like your desire to connect, right? And that's the main thing.
Yeah, thank you.
So we were in group 5, and the Shabad that we've been given was Balhari Gur Apne Dyohari Sadvar Janmanas Janmanas De Devte Kiye Kart Nala Ki Var. We unfortunately couldn't get to the second part of it. We were stuck on Balehari for I think a good 15 minutes of like just a good half of that chunk. I remember, I think it was Angad and his group, they mentioned they were talking about Balehari as well. So my group, we kind of ignored for the most part the translation that was given to us. And we kind of started thinking about what it could mean for us personally. And so one of the things that one of the themes that came up was that sacrifice here is a kind of a harsh word. Like we all have connotations of what sacrifice could mean, you know, whether it's throughout Sikh history or whether like what the literal definition of that word is on its own. One really interesting thing Kola had mentioned was she related it to this phrase in Punjabi, Sadke Jama. Now, I'll be honest, I've heard that a lot. I don't really know what it means. It's kind of attributed to like that gesture that you do to someone. You're like, Sadke Jama. And she was explaining how it's kind of, or like what we decided that it could mean was like just giving all of yourself to the Guru. So when we say like sacrifice, in a way, that is what you're doing. Like sacrifice is maybe more physical, and like I'm physically sacrificing my life for you, but it's also giving my heart, my soul, my body, my time, my energy, like giving every single thing that I have to you. And I thought that was a really interesting interpretation that we all came up with. Now I wanted to share that. So thank you, Kola, for that. And the rest of my team. They're awesome.
Yay, awesome teams. Yeah, so I think unfortunately we're running up against time here, but Jasleen, if you want to wrap up a little bit.
Okay. I guess everybody raised points that I think that I would have raised anyway, so that's great. It tells me that like these sessions were really generative, and that's really nice to see. I think what I would say is helpful to remember, because history was brought up, and then also this idea of like Guru as just the embodied form was brought up throughout today. And I think if we can get to a place where we're thinking about Shabad Guru, then we can understand Shabad as this constantly kind of living thing, and we can walk with it. It will change in our understanding over time, from a week to a month to a year. You can revisit things and read them completely differently. They have like lines will have certain things to tell you in certain moments. And so if we can think about it more as a thing that we walk with and change with, I think that's more helpful when we're going to look at translations. The point that was brought up about history, I think, is really important, because we were just talking about Sulok Mahila Noma this morning in a different session, and the question came up of, you know, this idea that Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib was like really political in the first half of his life, and then in the second half it was all meditation. And you know, in Sulok Mahila Noma there's all these references to like detachment and renunciation, and what does that mean? And so a thing that we talked about a lot when we were doing that translation and transcreation and commentary is like, well, look at the Guru's life. Was the Guru sitting in a forest and like not having a family and not having anything to do with their family at the end of their life? Or like, is that something that we know deep down to not be true? And if that's the case, then how are we reading these lines even about like renunciation? So yes, there's like a dialogue that happens there too. So I think, yeah, keeping all of those things in mind, and then also asking the kinds of questions that might seem really nitpicky about like what a particular word could mean, or what a particular translation word connotes. Like that question might seem kind of annoying and nitpicky, but it makes a huge difference. So the conversation that people had about whether it's and or for the moon and the sun is not a waste of time. The conversation about like why a sesame seed is definitely not a waste of time. So those things that maybe feel kind of tedious, those single word conversations that we've had as a team are the ones that I carry with me always, and that I return to always, because those simple words have so much to teach us. So that's all I'll say. I think, yeah, it was like a pleasure. I know I popped in kind of late, but it was a pleasure to witness everybody working through things together. So please keep doing it. Keep sitting with Shabad Guru and see how it changes you.
Yeah, and thank you everyone. Again, we've said this a few different times, but thank you truly everyone for participating and for engaging and for offering your insights. Again, it's an amazing thing to meet people and be okay with having this conversation and be willing to go so deep into like a personal relationship with something like Guru and something like Gurbani. So thank you for joining us. And we hope that you walk away with something after these 90 minutes that will provide something for you in the future. So with that, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and I think we give it back to Anu.
Yes, thank you. Wow, it's amazing to hear all of you and how this has been quite a transformational sort of session for those of you who have joined us for the 90 minutes. This is what we continue with at Sidak. This is the 2 weeks of continuation of this sort of learning and experience. Just a couple of things on as we're sharing from from a personal perspective. I find that translating Shabad to be quite an emotional experience, and some of you may have experienced that as well. This is something that touches your soul, touches your heart. And many times, and others did mention this in the comments as well, it takes time, and it takes patience. And so if you were struggling with the timing and thinking that you were not getting it as fast as others, know that that is the process, and it does take time. It definitely leaves you in a very contemplative state. So it's so great to hear everyone has enjoyed that. We're going to move next into our next presenter, who will be Harinder Singh. Harinder Singh is the co-founder of Sikh Research Institute, as well as the person who envisioned Sidak, and so has the longest standing relationship with Sidak. And so I'd like to ask him to come on as we kind of delve into where Sidak is now, where it came from, and where it will take us to. So Harinder Singh.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Well, we've been starting with the Fatehs, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and I'll start with the interpretation of that. If you take that in today's parlance in English, that would mean sovereign is of awesome wisdom and victory is also of the awesome wisdom. And if you notice, this Vaheguru part is the awesome wisdom part, and that's the continuity you heard in earlier two sessions. In Sidak, that's the continuity we're trying to provide a dimension of. But keep in mind that every discussion of sovereignty, which is what Khalsa's interpretation becomes, and Fateh, interpretation would be victory, is bound together, linked directly, fully with this idea of awesome wisdom. So, this discussions all of you have been having about divine force, guru, wisdom, connection, grace, essentially this oneness idea. But I do want to focus a little bit on this oneness a bit to start with. This oneness, if we spell it out, can be potentially funny. I mean funny in an awkward sense, because what does that really mean? It could be a very new age-ish fad thing. It's like someone saying, I used to think I was indecisive, but now I'm not so sure. I don't know if you get the joke, but that's the indecisiveness continues, but it sounded good. So whereas when Guru Nanak said Ikko Onkar, when he put Ik in Ikko Onkar, Ik only means with the numeral 1, it's very clear and it's very decisive. It means all, without exception, have access to that one force. All 7.5 billion people on this earth currently. That includes the darkest ones, the flawed ones, the fraudulent ones, people like me. We got a lot of our own challenges. So this access to Ikko Onkar, the one Ik here, the decisive one, the numeral one, actually that's what it's saying. In case you're wondering, no, I don't suffer from insanity here. I enjoy every moment of it when I'm especially reading Gurbani, and I was disrupting every thought we have had. And that Sidak, this is part of the disruption we are interested in, the disruption which Guru Nanak brought, with that level of clarity, humor, nuancing, feelings, emotions, learnings, and countering and transcending all the isms of the world. So even today's hukum, when I read it this morning, it was from Guru Ram Das Pacha. And we do hukum interpretations at Sidak as well. Because we learned from you just did a Shabad. And the hukum, when I read it this morning, it was in Rag Suhi. So that already tells me I don't need to think about that. Rag Suhi is all about love. Rag Suhi is when I'm drenched in love. When I have actually not just drenched, I have become of that color, that deep crimson. And all he says in there, Guru Ram Das Pacha, he says, I'm reflecting on it. His line is, Darshan har dekhan kehta hai, which means, when I'm looking at that, I was asking it myself, am I interested in that vision, the vision of the Har, which is the fear eliminator, the all-pervasive, the light, the force? Am I even interested in that vision, or I have created some other fixation of whatever the God, Lord, or whatever it means to be a believer or a cynic or an atheist or a Gnostic? We got all sorts of things going on. And we participate in those discussions, in proving and disproving those things. But Guru Nanak is, in this case, Guru Ram Das Pacha is actually saying, I'm interested in the vision of the Har. And Har literally means the one who eliminates the fears. And he says, if I'm interested in that, and Guru Ram Das Pacha is saying, and I'm reflecting on it, he says, if I'm interested in this, what do I do? And he says, well, then I feel the grace, and I connect with the wisdom, connect with the Guru. And then I contemplate on Hari, Harinam, which basically means I identify with the force, that Ikomankar force. So if we are looking to eliminate fears in our lives, that's the question we would ask based on today's question. And honestly, in Sidak, then what we try to do is take these ideas of connecting with the Bani, learning with the Bani, and apply it, make it relevant and current. So fear of death is overwhelming us right now. India is on our minds. There's a COVID devastation. There are piles of dead bodies outside cremation grounds, and in the roads in front of hospitals. There is oxygen deprivation. And then at the top of it, we have farmers and labor movements, which started as a protest, and all these Punjab and Sikh factors in there, where they're not even allowing oxygen to Punjab from Pakistan. So death, the fear of death, this is what's in the news if you are connected to India right now. Now, if you look at from a global angle also, Gaza is also on our minds. So we got to be able to apply these things, whatever we're learning. Israel, Palestine, Zionism, Hamas, the role of America, and then allyship throughout the world for any real two-state solution that actually will stop killings. That's on our minds. It's continuing. These forces are continuing to create these pile of death bodies in different ways. Personally, in this COVID era, we have another fear which has amplified now, fear of being alone, fear that we might remain separated in our relationships. And that frightens us. It's been accentuated with a number of conversations which you probably have been part of, and I've read upon, and I'm personally going through many things. So our relationships are on our minds. The Bani is also about that. Whether it's with my spouse or spouse-to-be, my siblings, my parents, my friends, my spirituality, my guru, my divine, my force. And the question I keep asking is, will I experience or continue to experience love in a human relationship? Or will I ever experience eternal love in a divine relationship? That's the real separation in Gurbani. But these are real questions for us, for the globe. And that's what we do at Sidak. We learn from the eternal wisdom to conquer our fears at personal levels first. This is where we explore Ikonkar, Naam, Guru, Shabad, as all of you did today. We connect through the shared collective Sikhi experience. We learn the Shabad and we feel the Naam. We are the imperfect ones, right? The separated ones, the dark ones. Yes, the darkest ones too also have access to Ek Oankar and Naam. It is not denied in this declaration of Ek Oankar to anyone. So we also long for that connection, the intimate connection, where we discover meaning for ourselves. We discover meaning for, you discover meaning for yourself, the self which connects to the Ek Oankar self. And as a result of that, we make a conscious decision at some point in our lives to become the active agents of that force. This is where, Star Wars-like analogy from 60s can help you, and the movies are still continuing if you struggle with the vocabulary of Guru Nanak, for example. So while in our facilitators today, there were many, so while we enjoy our K-pop dances or creative artistic impressions, or whether we participate in anti-supremacy rallies or support Sikh causes, or build careers in technology or medicine, or we research and interpret Shabad in Guru Granth Sahib, or explore dimensions of Sikh culture, or whether we're imparting knowledges to high schoolers or adults, or work as consultants or fund managers. While we do all of that, and many more other things, as some of the facilitators did today, we still remain devoted to that one force. That's the idea we are trying to bring out more in Sidak, this conviction of connection to the force. That's what we attempt to impart, I should say, to learn to conquer the fear or death, fear of unknown, the fear of separation, the fear of loneliness. And when I do allow the light to enter my being, when we do allow the Shabad to chisel our consciousness, that's when you and I become active agents of love and justice. And to do what? Well, to address the darkness in our communities and in the nations we live in. And for that, we do need trainings. We are an element of training. There are many trainings needed. Let us train ourselves to become these love-drenched warriors in all spheres of life. So we may fight for the Guru's glory, not personal glory, so we can live in the praise of the force. And I leave you with that's our aspiration for Sidak. It will continue to be as we bring more and more people. Today, you heard people from India and Pakistan, as well as from the Western Hemisphere. And may we gracefully learn to identify with Naam, which essentially is feeling the rays of light. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Harinder Singh, for that I hear the passion. I definitely hear the passion, and that I just want to highlight for all of you that is where Sidak is born out of. And those of us who have gone through Sidak, as I mentioned earlier, that spark and that passion was lit within us in order for us to continue to come back, and in order for us to continue to bring that light within us as well. We truly, truly hope that you enjoyed today's session, and we have more coming up. So for those of you who are looking for more, please watch your inboxes, watch your social media. We will be posting for upcoming events for the summer of 2021. And hopefully in 2022, we will all get to meet in person in Mission, British Columbia. It's my backyard, it's my home. I would be very, very happy to have all of you here and to experience this in a beautiful natural setting as well. But as I mentioned, please stay tuned to our social media and to our emails that will be coming in. We will be giving you more information for events to come. Just a couple of things as we wrap up for today. Just a couple of thank yous. Thank you to our facilitation team, all of the work that went in behind the scenes to pull these sessions together. It was very much appreciated, and thank you very much. Also to Jasleen Kaur. This is someone that has been behind the scenes, and many of you did not get a chance to meet her. However, none of this would have been possible without her. She has been just an incredible person to have back there, switching and turning, and how is this not happening? So Jasleen, thank you so much for being that person for all of us to connect with. And last but not least, the biggest thank you of all goes to all of you for sharing your time with us, for connecting, for being vulnerable. And we really, really hope to see you once again at some of our events. There are some that are looking for more in the next little while. Please watch for we do have on our YouTube channel, we do have past webinars as well. Our social media with Twitter and Instagram and Facebook has more content there as well, including our website that was just put into the link as well. Before you go, just a quick thing. We will be sending out a feedback form in the next few hours. I would really encourage you all to fill that form out, as it is an opportunity for you to tell us how the session went and for us in terms of our planning for events to come. I hope all of you have an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining us. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.